Hello! Today our team would like to talk about William Bernstein's book, A Splendid Exchange. The main idea of the author is to give a complete detailed picture of the development of international trade from its origin in prehistoric times to the present day, to tell about the events that influenced its formation. The book is divided into parts. The first two chapters tell us about the origin of trade. Chapters from 3 to 6 describe what happened in the waters of the Indian Ocean. Chapters from the 7th to the 10th describe how the vast multicultural trading system was shaking when Vasco da Gama circumvented the Muslim blockade that closed the gateway to the Indian Ocean for Europeans. After the battle, the surviving farmers noticed that the enemy's helmets were made of a reddish material on a leather headpiece. Copper was a novelty for them because there was not any place where they could receive this metal in their habitat. The attackers bought the metal from the traders who lived near the fields hundreds of kilometers to the west in the Sinai Desert. With the development of agriculture, sedentary farmers began to use boats for river travel. Then the patterns of trading were born, and they will be unchanged for thousands of years. More advanced farming communities transported grain, livestock clothing, and tools. They exchanged these items for goods, primarily animal skin. Such prehistoric markets were located on islands. Such places are not only convenient for boats, but also minimize the chances of success of an ambush. Chapters from the 11th to 14th explore modern world trade from the perspective of new economic teachings. Let's start with a story about how it all started. Somewhere around 3,000 years before Christ, the tribe of herders attacked the small settlements of Sumerians in the time of harvest. Armed with maces, the villagers met the attackers in close combat. Raids during the harvest were common. Ghosts and ships suffered from diseases and depended on the whims of nature, so for the survival of nomadic tribe, frequent raids were necessary to seize grain from neighboring farmers. In one of the battles, the cattlemen had strange shiny helmets that turned out to protect their owners. The once deadly blows of the maces now only slightly stunned them.
Then natural selection results in both a more resistant population and a less lethal pathogen. Xenopsilla gyopsis is a particular species of flea, which is the crucial link in the chain of death. The most famous epidemic of ancient history is the Athenian plague of 430 BC, which killed about one-fourth of the empire's army. The plague had an awful impact on trade and on the world population. The Mongols, who were the primary vector of the disease, even could not recover ever in the history of the world. Another essential thing that also should be mentioned is the plague. The plague bacillus spends most of its time in an animal reservoir, like many other human pathogens. And usually people would keep distance from a diseased animal, as it could be told apart by its sluggish behavior. But sometimes the interaction happened, and it did mostly because of outsiders who are unfamiliar with local custom. We owe our modern appreciation of the origins and historical effects of infectious disease to William H. McNeill. Commerce and travel can spread pathogens, both novel and well-established, among continents with frightening speed. The plague is the disease of trade, and the interaction between it and the trade works both ways. And in the ancient and pre-modern world times, the world was an epidemiologic tinderbox of several completely separate geographic disease pools. The good news is that today, relatively little further mixing of existence organisms can occur. Pandemics result only when an organism from a non-human host mutates and acquires the ability to infect humans.
Well, in my part of this video, I would like to discuss the idea of investments taken by the Dutch people and its influence on trading system. Let's start from the beginning. In the 17th century, Dutch peasants, aristocrats, and merchants started to invest their money into securities to finance reclamation projects. By doing this, they improved the level of agriculture in the country and made themselves less dependent on church and government loans. And later, this idea carried out into trade. It was normal for Dutch people to invest their money into traveling ships, for example, to the Baltic or Spice Islands, and it was called fractional share. It allowed entrepreneurs and investors to spread the risk among them, and thus the second provided more capital for voyages. But besides fractional share, Dutch people also had a futures market. The idea of futures is that an investor will get a good he invested money in a future at a constant price. Thus, by buying futures, a customer could not be worried about price hikes. To sum up this idea of investments, we can say that it had positive effects on trading system and navigation in general. For example, having enough money before the voyage made it possible for the shippers to acquire maritime insurance, to buy some new equipment for their ship, and improve their voyage in other spheres. It also should be said that the idea of investments was one of the main factors which allowed Dutch East India Company to become the most successful trading company in the world in 17th century.
Now I'd like to discuss the business which became very popular in the 19th century. It was the shipment of perishables. Refrigerated vehicles started to appear in the 1830s. They used to carry out seasoned grapes, pears, peaches, but the most demand was for beef. In 1875, the American beef distributor Timothy Eastman shipped the first chilled meat from the New York to England. Further, there were several attempts to make artificial cooling machine, and William Cullen succeeded in making ice at room temperature. In 1878, the first artificial ice plant was opened. And then Henry Bell and William Thomson were thinking about the idea of transporting artificially frozen and chilled meat. They built a fleet of mechanically refrigerated ships. By 1910, the United States was sending about 400,000 tons of beef to Britain each year. And on the eve of the World War I, nearly 40% of meat consumed by Britain came from abroad. The European reaction to the avalanche of agricultural products from the New World would set back the world trade movement for over half a century. Another point that I want to discuss is the Smoot-Hawley tariff and its influence on the world trade system. The Smoot-Hawley represented the high tide of worldwide protectionism that flowed on the new global agricultural trade. Eli Heckscher and Berlin Ochlin were two economists who realized that decreased shipping costs created the convergence of the prices of the three main input factors: wages, rents, and interest rates. Further, Stopler and Samuelson created Stopler-Samuelson theorem, which claims that the political fallout affects the fate of nations. Reducing the price of shipping has the same effect as lowering tariffs. So the owners of abundant factors favored free trade, but owners of scarce factors sought protection. With the development of technology, it became faster to transport, but these technologies could not deal with large tariffs and caused a downturn in world economy. And in 1930, Hoover signed Smoot-Hawley into law, and the trade war began. High tariffs on foreign goods were set. European countries answered by rising import duties. Therefore, by 1933, the entire globe got in a condition in which all countries achieved self-sufficiency in all products, no matter how inept they are at producing them. This was called autarky. The world trade stopped, and there was a world in the throes of depression. But in fact, tariff wars were not the actual case of world trade decline, but the world depression decreased the demand for trade products. Thus, in 1947, formation of the International Trade Organization took off almost all pre-war barriers. In this video we were talking about aspects of trade, which we have found the most interesting. And during reading The Splendid Exchange by Bernstein, we have understood the way how trade was developing and learned some insights about the world trading system. The book is worth reading, and the key factors of development are important to be aware of economy and trading system. That's all. Thank you for attention.